that's the other thing with mirrors, because I found you don't look the same in every single mirror. It can vary. And in this particular mirror, I felt that I could just see absolutely everything, and it just made me stop. And I thought, I thought the only option I had was to kill myself, basically.
Hello and welcome to A Doctor's View, a podcast looking at everyday health topics and life through a doctor's eyes. Please note that all opinions are my own and should not replace the advice given to you by your own doctor. I'm Dr. Bolivios. Let's begin. Hello and welcome to A Doctor's View. Today I'm going to be talking about body dysmorphic disorder, or BDD. BDD is a mental health condition related to body image. A sufferer of BDD experiences obsessive worries about one or more perceived flaws in their physical appearance. And the key word here is perceived. These flaws are either so minor that they cannot be seen by others, or indeed just part of normal variation and not flaws at all. These anxiety manifests into compulsive behaviours and routines, such as excessive use of mirrors or picking at skin to try and deal with these worries about appearance. And ultimately, these obsessive thoughts and behaviour patterns not only cause emotional distress, but can have significant impact on day-to-day life and just the ability to carry out normal, everyday tasks. This devastating disorder is said to affect up to 1 in 50 people in the UK. And joining me today to share her story and experiences with BDD is Minnie Iris. Minnie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, obviously here to discuss about BDD and your experiences with it. Taking us back to when you first noticed symptoms of BDD, how old were you and how did this whole journey start?
Yeah, I was 11 years old, and I remember that I became obsessed with lines around my neck, as you would naturally get. But they started to really concern me, and I found that I was looking in the mirror quite a lot and sort of checking them. Mm-hmm. But that did fade away after a few months. I think the beginning of the BDD, or what's really caused it, is that I was bullied at school, and it was mainly for being Asian, but I also had quite a prominent nose at that time, and so just being sort of made fun of the way that I looked and being told that I was ugly, even though it was by children, that is pretty much what sort of like began the BDD, or made the beliefs very strong within me that there's something wrong with the way that I look. The other element is that there was mental illness in my family, so there was a genetic link as well. And when you develop BDD, often it's a combination of things that might happen. So it can be genetics, and then you can add environment conditioning to it as well.
And all this at 11 years old?
At that time, I was 11 and I was still at school. And I was getting bullied for my nose quite a lot. And at the time, what I did is I started to shade my nose. So I put makeup on it to try and make it look smaller. And that was kind of like the sort of beginnings of using safety behaviours to helped me feel that I looked better, and it brought my anxiety down as well at the time.
I see. Okay, so started at 11 and school life, and what routines did you find yourself doing? I know you mentioned the shading. Did you notice that there was other behaviours going on?
Yeah, well, actually, what happened is that I had cosmetic surgery. And I had that when I was 18 years old. It was actually on my 18th birthday, because in those days, I'm 51 at the moment, to have cosmetic surgery, you had to be 18 or above, because they say that your bones don't stop growing. I think the age has come down a bit nowadays. So I had cosmetic surgery, which my mother paid for at the time. And that kind of gave me some relief for a period of time. Because one of the other things I used to do is try and sit in certain ways so people wouldn't see my profile, as well as the makeup. So that was one of the sort of safety behaviours at the time. But I had the cosmetic surgery, and as I said, felt better for a period of time. But then what I found was that my mind switched to another part of my body. The BDD switched to other areas. And I have to say, in terms of cosmetic surgery, it's never a solution for BDD.
So you say it gave you temporary relief.
Yeah.
And how long did that relief last for?
Probably, I would say about 6 months. But it wasn't long before the thoughts sort of started again.
And did you find immediately after the surgery, did you feel better straight away, or?
Yeah, it was just a relief. It felt like I was normal and like other people.
That's quite prominent part of it was the surgery at 18, and after the 6 months, what then began to happen?
Yeah, well, because the beliefs had already been formed, that is the challenging thing, because having an operation is just something that changes you physically. But the thoughts started up again, and then it was focused around my body. I also had quite a lot of hair as well.
Okay.
Bodily hair. So I would worry about that a lot. And just sort of being in, at the time, a sort of moderate level of anxiety pretty much all the time, which I thought was normal. But the worry was always around my appearance. Right. I never really talked about it to other people.
So it was very much your own thing,
yes,
as it were. And you said, obviously, from 11 to 18 when you had the procedure.
Yes.
And between that age group, what was happening between those sort of 7 years?
Yeah, I mean, what was happening in terms of externally is that I was going to a particular school which my mum didn't realise was not in a great area, to be honest with you. And at the time, it was fashionable to be a skinhead.
Right.
And we were also put into a school that had very few Asian children. So I was a bit of a target on a daily basis for racism, mostly.
That must have been difficult.
Yeah, it was very difficult. But my mum, she was a single mum, and actually I never told her because I didn't want to worry her.
Fine. So you had to deal with the perception that you had of yourself, and also you then had external factors, so it made things worse.
Really bad, yeah.
Okay.
No, exactly.
Right, I see. Did you, I know you said you didn't tell your mum, did you do anything else at the time to try and deal with this?
Well, what I did is I just focused on my appearance. It was like, well, if I can make myself look okay and acceptable for what I thought I had to be, then that kind of kept the anxiety down.
That shut everything else off, really. That was your barrier in a way, the sort of focusing on one thing. And
that was the way that I managed. So it was a coping strategy, really. Yeah.
I see. And did family, friends, they notice any behaviour changes? They question anything, or?
No, I was very good at hiding it, and any rituals that I might have performed, i.e. mirror checking or putting on makeup to shade my nose, and I didn't really let anybody see it. It was done privately.
say if that took you longer to do in the morning or during, would you get up early in secret, or would you just be so good at it, being quick at it? And
yeah, I was relatively quick at doing it, but in terms of people generally that have BDD, rituals can take hours sometimes, but in my case I was quite quick.
I see. And prior to the surgery, did you take any did you know you had BDD?
No, not at all.
And did you take any steps other than the rituals did you think that there was any issues with anxiety or anything else that you thought to seek help with?
No.
So it's just purely living this life,
yes.
And without realising there was an issue at all?
Absolutely, without realising that it was a mental illness. And a big part of me just kind of thought, well, this is normal. Most people probably feel like this. But I also accepted the fact that what I'd been told by people when I was young is that I'm ugly. So it was like, well, I'm ugly and there's nothing I can do about it, because the beliefs were so powerful. And even when I grew up, I still had the beliefs, and just kind of like, got on with life.
So we're at the point now, you've been teased at school, and that seems to be the catalyst with things, and then been focusing on appearance, especially nose and then hair as well. And you finally had the operation at 18 for nose reconstruction. Is that?
That's correct. Yes, that's right.
And that lasted for about 6 months in terms of feeling better.
Yes.
And then things, the same thoughts started to go over.
Yeah.
You mentioned people calling you all sorts of things and calling about your appearance. And did you find this was one or two people, or was it?
Yeah, it was just a handful of people. However, I think because I had such a sensitive nature,
Yes.
and it's quite classic that most people with BDD are quite sensitive people. A lot of artists have, a lot of people that have BDD tend to be creative.
Sure.
So, whereas those kind of comments may not have affected another person, but they really did affect me. It had a big impact.
It's amazing hearing that. Actually, it's often we sometimes look at bullying at school and think, oh, it's innocent children remark, and we don't perhaps sometimes see the way it can affect others.
Absolutely.
Not everyone's the same.
No, exactly.
So, in that time, obviously, you've mentioned a lot of mirror checking and things like that. Can you tell me a little bit about that? How did that affect you in everyday life, as it were, in that it was a teenager needing to do things and then having to check to make sure everything's okay, or just reassure yourself? And how was that?
Yeah, at the time, it would be more like whenever I was near a reflective surface, whether it was a mirror or a window, I'd just sort of take a quick look. Does everything look okay? Yes, okay, it does. Or do I need to do something? As in put a bit more makeup on. And then once I felt that I looked exactly okay, the anxiety would come down and I'd just get on with things. But I did the checks very quickly, and actually more as a process of life. So whenever I was walking past a mirror or a window.
Did it become almost habit as well?
Yes.
So shiny surface, quick check. and then so it didn't, to want for better for it didn't affect in terms of sort of timing. Were you ever late for things as a result of it, or?
No, not really.
Fine. So you again just became very good at it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Wow. So this is far more. There'll be people, I've heard people in the past say, "Oh, it's a vanity thing," or this, and this is far more than just being self-conscious of making sure you look, a certain way for an Instagram photo. This is far more than that, obviously.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that is a bit of a misconception. A lot of people think it's about vanity,
Yeah.
but it's a serious psychological disorder.
Absolutely.
And the way that it manifests is an obsession with your appearance.
I understand. So still yet to have a diagnosis, as it were, yet.
Yes, that's right.
And then what happens after? So you've had your operation, 6 months down the line, things getting bad again, and you're still 18, I take it, at the time.
Yes.
And then what happened after that?
After that, it was a case of just living life, but always constantly checking my appearance. Yeah.
So just getting on with normal things.
With normal things. Exactly.
Again, just feeling that it was a normal, or normal for you, as it were.
Absolutely, yeah.
I see.
Yeah, and I thought that maybe that's just how most people are. That it was, and actually, later on in life, and this comes up in the groups. Actually, it's really hard to believe for people that some people don't actually care about their appearance. Right.
So people with BDD, you're saying,
yes,
don't care about their appearance, but they focus. Is it because they focus on one specific thing rather than the whole overall? What they feel is.
Yeah. No, sorry. What I meant is that when you have BDD, it's very difficult to believe that other people are actually okay about their appearance.
I see. Okay. So it's a way of thinking everyone's like this, or everyone must be a bit like
everyone
this
must be
to
a
some
bit
extent.
Like that. Exactly.
I see. Sorry, I understand. And what then happened? So after things got a little bit more worse, and so you went down your everyday life, and then there must have been a turning point, as it were.
Yes, no, absolutely. And what happened is that I met someone, I got married, and I went to university. I did a degree in fine art. I did that as a mature student. So for about 10 years, everything kind of ticked along, and it wasn't really it didn't really show itself in a very extreme way externally at that time. But I got divorced, and then at the same sort of time, my mother passed away. So I would say that was the turning point when the BDD really got very badly triggered. Yeah. And what became the obsession at that time was my hair.
Yes.
Because losing my mum and getting divorced was quite a stressful situation. I'd started to lose it because of stress, but also, and because I started to try and find cures for my hair loss. So one of the things I did was get a referral to a dermatologist.
Okay.
And the dermatologist said that I've got female pattern balding because my father and my brothers have also had balding. I thought as a female that you can't get... I thought it was just male pattern balding. I didn't realise there was a female equivalent of it. And they said there's basically nothing really you can do apart from maybe using minoxidil, which is kind of like a hair loss treatment. But you have to use it all the time.
Yeah. I believe its effects stop when you stop taking it. Is that correct?
Yes, no, exactly. So basically, for that period of time when that situation was triggered, I think almost for like 7 years, I thought about my hair from the moment my eyes opened in the morning till the moment I fell asleep. I would just constantly be thinking about my hair. One of the safety behaviours at that time was actually to ask my friends for reassurance. So when I would meet my friends socially, one of the first things I would say is that, oh, do you think my hair looks okay, or do you think I've lost more hair? And I'd be talking about it to them. So it was a case of trying to get reassurance and look for treatments. I ended up spending quite a lot of money. I had some Chinese herbal treatment, some acupuncture. So that kind of went on for a few years, and I isolated myself for that period of time as well.
And how old were you at this point now?
So at that time, I was about 44.
About 44.
Yes, that's right.
So it's been a sort of quite a big period between the sort of early 30s, 44,
Yeah.
and all this time has been focusing on the hair loss. Was this, looking back, this was an actual diagnosis? This was that you had the hair loss? I know you mentioned you went to a dermatologist, or were you seeing it worse than, if you were to look back now, than what it was?
Yeah, I mean, if I look back now, yes, my hair was getting thinner. However, it's something that happens to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So my reaction to it was quite extreme, because I felt that there was no point in me going on with my life if my hair was going to constantly be falling out and thinning.
It affected you that much?
Yes, yeah. Mm.
And when you had these thoughts, what happened then?
Well, I struggled a lot. Some days I'd get totally wiped out by it.
Yeah.
And also moving around, leaving the house and moving around town and just doing what you need to do, like grocery shopping or going somewhere, became incredibly stressful, because there are reflective surfaces pretty much everywhere you go. Yeah. And then at that time, I started to avoid looking into mirrors, because when I looked at my reflection, for me, I perceived that as being horrific. And it was terrifying to actually look at myself.
So did you found yourself just shutting yourself out, and just, would you stay at home all day, or if you
most days I might occasionally see a friend, but when I kind of like hit rock bottom, I'd gone away for a weekend with a friend of mine, and we were staying in this particular place which had certain mirrors with lighting. And that's the other thing with mirrors, because I found you don't look the same in every single mirror. It can vary. And in this particular mirror, I felt that I could just see absolutely everything, and it just made me stop. And I thought, the only option I had was to kill myself, basically. And that was another turning point. And then I came home. But there was part of me which is quite resilient, and I think that's probably it's the resilience that's kind of kept me going over the years. But there was a part of me that still wanted to kind of reach out and get some help. So what I did is I did some research on the internet. Yeah. I, by that time, had heard of BDD. And I kind of had a sneaky suspicion that maybe I had it. So I Googled it, and actually the BDD Foundation came up at that time as well. And there was also a documentary which was online, which was called Too Ugly for Love. So I watched that, read the information on the BDD Foundation website, and that kind of was like, oh, okay, so I have something which is an illness, which there is actually treatment for. So what I did is I called my GP and made an appointment to go and see her. So then that week I went to see her, and I went in and just said, look, I think I have body dysmorphic disorder and I'm suicidal and I need help. It was interesting because her response at the time was, yes, but a lot of people are concerned about their appearance and perhaps you're just depressed. And she wanted to refer me for sort of generic counselling for BDD. But I'd done a bit of homework on it, and I said, look, I know that I need specific help for body dysmorphic disorder, and I was quite sort of assertive about it. So she said, okay, that's fine. We'll make the referral. And I was extremely lucky in those days. If you were suicidal, then you were seen quite quickly. So I got my treatment in about 6 weeks of actually applying for it, which is really fast. I was really lucky because I was given a great therapist. We had a really good connection, and she was incredibly supportive. So I was given 20 sessions of CBT.
And that's cognitive behavior therapy, is
Yes, that's right. And that's pretty much the only proven method of recovering from BDD. But I remember when I drove for my very first appointment, and I was sitting in the car park, and I thought, well, they're not going to be able to help me to stop. They're not going to be able to help with my hair loss. So I don't really know what's going to happen with this treatment.
So ultimately,
my thinking was still very much focused that there's something wrong with the way that I look.
Fine. So you're thinking, unless they can sort that out, then
else?
how?
Yeah.
So it's not a case of is it the problem being the way I'm thinking about it rather than the actual problem itself. It was very much determined that it was the problem.
Absolutely.
Rather than anything else, and couldn't really understand, what benefit this is gonna give you.
No, that's right.
Okay.
And actually, that process of going from having an absolute core belief that there's something wrong with the way that I look to, okay, I have a mental illness, getting to that place, which I did, thankfully, took a few months of doing my therapy. But I was starting to get a foot in each camp after a few months. And then it took probably about 1.5 years for me to fully believe that there's nothing wrong with the way that I look and I have a serious mental illness.
So, people think that that's a long time, but actually in the whole scheme of things, given that you had, is it about 40 years of life at the moment, 40 years old you were roughly, and the majority of life having this this thing, these thoughts, and then in 1.5 years managed to basically eradicate those thoughts. Is that fair to say, or not eradicate fully?
Yeah, not eradicate fully. And I would, really stress that recovering from BDD is a process. Yeah. And I say that so that if people do go out there looking for treatment, that not to feel disheartened if even after 6 months they might be struggling a bit.
It's not a quick fix, as it were.
It's quite rare. Some people may experience that, but in my experience, that can be relatively rare. And so basically what happened is, in that period, which really was the beginning of my BDD recovery process, what happened was that I'd get some recovery, then I'd relapse, then I'd do more exposure work. And exposure work is pretty much one of the most powerful ways to recover from BDD. And it involves you having to do things that you're really afraid of doing. So one of the exposure exercises I had was not to wear any makeup when I went out and about. And that felt absolutely terrifying to begin with, because if I thought that people would shout out racial abuse at me because I didn't sort of look as best as I thought I could. But taking that leap of faith and doing the exposure work, it's slowly started to change the way that I thought. And I realised, actually, other people don't really care how I look, and people are not going to shout at me. So it was experiences like that. And over the years, every time I did exposure work, and I'd get new insights, and the beliefs were starting to change.
And was that was this exposure work advocated to you by the therapist? Something
yes,
to do,
is, yeah.
And how often would you have to do this?
Well, whenever I possibly could. And the thing with CBT therapy is that you really have to do the work yourself. the therapist is only there to, they can only do
guide
so
you,
much,
as it were.
but there's a lot of homework to do on it. Because I was quite a severe case at the time, and I actually didn't have very much support with family, they also offered to give me someone that would come and visit me to see if I was okay, and someone that would actually do the exposure work with me. After the sort of first initial period of some recovery, I was able to do it myself. So when I went to buy new clothes, normally I would have avoided looking into mirrors, but I was like, okay, I'm just going to have a quick look, just for a few seconds. And that would feel really terrifying, but then eventually the anxiety would come down. So it was a case of like chipping away at it, doing them whenever I felt that I could, that I was strong enough to do it. And sometimes I wasn't strong enough to do it. And sometimes I fell back into doing lots of safety behaviours. And again, I would say that is still part of the recovery process for BDD, because every time I had a relapse, as difficult as it was also a learning experience. I learned from it.
And what can you describe some of the safety behaviours that you would go back into just as a fail-safe mechanism?
Yeah, it would be wearing makeup, making sure that I was wearing nice clothes, mirror checking.
So going back to the original kind of behaviours that led you, that you first started having.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
So that was your comfort, as it were, or your safety net, as it were. And how did you find BDD affected things like relationships, friendships, and things like that?
Yeah, I've always had difficulty in forming intimate relationships, particularly in the romantic sense. And it wasn't really until I started to understand BDD that I realised that that's probably a pretty big part of it. I was married, however, it wasn't really a true connection, and it wasn't really a true authentic intimacy that I had with my husband at that time. Yeah, so... And now I have actually been single for quite a long time. But what I started to do as part of my exposure work with my therapist was I went on Tinder.
Okay.
And I started to go on dates. And that was quite cool that was my homework.
So that was advocated by the therapist to go.
It was my suggestion, and I was like, I was thinking of doing this. What do you think? And she was like, yeah, I think it's great. So I'd go in and we'd chat about it and stuff like that, and that gave me a lot of confidence, because even though I didn't meet someone to have a relationship with, it gave me more confidence in terms of going on dates and being a bit more relaxed around the opposite sex, and also that these people just accepted me and didn't think I was some kind of freak.
These people obviously never met you before, and just by seeing a photo, essentially, happy to meet up. That must have been quite a nice thing. Yeah, exactly. So it was pretty scary, and in terms of exposure, that was pretty full on, really, in that sense. I didn't meet anyone to have a relationship with at that time, but I am dating someone at the moment. Oh, that's lovely.
So I'm really happy about that. Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Thank you.
And obviously you don't have the same things have improved since that time, so between 40 odd year old to now. What's happened in that time? Yeah, I mean, in that time I've been on my recovery journey, but also I am a trustee at the BDD Foundation now, and I help to run support groups for people that have BDD. There's a couple in London which I help with. So that's become my real sort of passion in life. And it's been a very rewarding and healing experience. I'm sure, yeah. So, and I also like raising awareness for people that have BDD. And I've been kind of rebuilding my life, really. I've been travelling, and I went travelling for a couple of years, not this year, but the 2 years prior to that. I was doing lots of short trips
and they were that every time I went, it was an exposure process, and there was a turning point on that as well when I'd done a lot of like workshops on self-development back to back, and it'd been about a couple of years, and I did this one workshop, and it was just incredible. It's like all the beliefs that I had about myself, which I'd been working and chipping away at, they just suddenly all like just collapsed. The sort of belief system around the negativity and the way that I look at, they just like fell to the ground, because it was like I got all the insights that I needed to, you know, to really complete my recovery process within the 2 years that I was travelling. Yeah.
So the travelling was definitely almost an elation moment at some point in those 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, within the first early years, I would feel better, and then I might have had a relapse and I would feel suicidal again. But it was a case of picking myself up. Okay, let's keep on doing this. Let's keep on doing the exposure work. But after that period, and actually after that workshop, I never got the suicidal stuff again.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And the whole process of the recovery seems to be stemmed from you thinking that there might be a problem, and going on the internet and just doing the odd, just the little bit of browsing and thinking, oh, this looks like something I might have.
Yeah.
In terms of, was there no other than your own belief of there might be something going on? Was there anything else that may have triggered you to go online or seek some form of advice, some form of help?
Yeah, I have to say there was really nothing, because awareness for BDD has been pretty low over the years. We're doing all we can as a charity to change that. Even so, it's still so low. It's still quite a bit of a drop in the ocean to some extent. But the awareness was just, it was just so low that there was nothing really apart from the BDD Foundation, which at that time was still quite a new charity. Yeah.
And going back to the CBT, the cognitive behavior therapy, I hear that a lot, especially in people who have OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and there's obviously a close link between OCD and BDD. Did you find any behaviours other than appearance side of things? Did you find any other OCD type behaviours that people with OCD would be able to associate with, or was it just purely based on appearance?
No, it wasn't. And I have got mild OCD, and it's quite common if you have OCD or BDD or an eating disorder, and they're all the same part of the same family of illnesses. Often you can get 2 or even 3 sometimes together, and I also have had an eating disorder as well. So I did have some OCD symptoms, but they were pretty minor compared to the other things that were going on. And they were things that were connected with the contamination. So people with OCD would probably be able to relate to that.
And do you feel that there are more conditions surfacing under a similar spectrum now? So bigorexia, for example, is a relatively newer term for men thinking that they need to be a certain way in terms of muscles and things. Are you finding with the foundation that you're helping people? Are people coming up with more things like this, or?
Yeah, we do see bigorexia, and it's I would say, I mean, it's still BDD, but the title
it's a subset
like,
of it, as it were.
Absolutely. Yeah,
fine.
Yeah.
I see. And do you think that BD is becoming more picked up more often now, or you went to your GP and the immediately it was almost a slight dismissal at the time, thinking you haven't got this, you've got this, and it took you to push for that. But do you think now things are getting a bit better in terms of picking it up?
Yes, I think things are improving. There was a documentary which the BBC made called Ugly Me, and that has had quite a lot of exposure. We've had quite a few people coming into the support groups on the back of seeing that, and then coming and they're like, well, we just saw this documentary and
we think we might have
might have BDD. So that's helped a huge amount. And as a charity, we've got various projects in the pipeline. One of them is to make some information available about BDD more accessible to GPs. So that's kind of in the pipeline. And also about talking about BDD at schools, at the school level.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so that's something in the pipeline as well.
What age groups are you looking at talking to?
I would imagine it's going to be from 11 years old to, so it would be secondary school. Starting
puberty, early years, and then going through into teenage life.
No, absolutely.
So important years, really. Yeah.
Crucial, absolutely. Yeah. Very important years.
From your experience meeting the sufferers with BDD in the foundation groups that you chair, and do you notice that there's been an increase in men being affected as well as women? What do you think the sort of ratios are, or is men becoming more affected as time's gone on, or was it before just women only, or what's the conception about that? Yeah,
I think the misconception is that it's something that affects women more than it does men. And really, judging by the support groups, that's not really true, because we've always had as many men as women. Yeah.
Do you find that they, on both sides, they focus on similar things, or do men particularly focus on certain aspects of their appearance and women tend to focus on other aspects of their appearance? Or do you find it's just a mixed and you couldn't differentiate between the two just based on their symptoms?
Yeah, no, I would say it can be anything. It can be hair or skin or eyes, which you can have in women as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, apart from, as we've already mentioned, bigorexia, building muscles.
Sure. That does tend to, that one is a bit more sort of specialised, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
And what advice would you have for someone who thinks that they may have BDD? What advice do you have for them? Someone listening to this, for example, or looking at some things online, thinking I might be suffering from this. What do you?
Yeah, I would suggest that they go onto the BDD Foundation website, where there is a plethora of information. And the second step, I would say, is to go and see their GP as soon as possible. If their GP hasn't heard of BDD, then they can take a download from the website which explains what BDD is. They can take that into the
practice with them,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they may have to push for treatment, because I know that some of the people that come to the groups, it's not always easy to get the treatment. So, and as I said before, if you were suicidal, then you would get the treatment quite quickly, but it seems that that's not necessarily happening these days either. So, and maybe, it's lack of funding, etc. So, but they may have to really push for it.
So, and obviously they can speak to someone in the BDD Foundation as well.
I would recommend that if they're able to come to a support group, and they can meet us, we can speak to them. They'll also get support from coming there, because there's other people that have BDD.
Just to see that you're not the only one, that there are other people with the same thought process, and help is out there.
Exactly.
I know you mentioned that growing up you were very much felt alone in this. No one picked up on anything, and there's a lot of people out there, with family and friends who they may feel that their friends have this condition, or they're noticing these behaviours. And what advice do you have for them, as it were, someone noticing it in someone else?
Yeah, that's a really tricky one, because if you have BDD and you don't actually seek help yourself, it can be quite tricky.
Right.
So if people do have someone they think they might have BDD, they could give them like a gentle nudge. Oh, I've heard that it's something that's a treatable condition, or I notice that you worry about your appearance a lot and that concerns me. And they could maybe give them the BDD Foundation website so they can have a little look. Yeah. But I think it's a case of sort of giving a gentle nudge to people to start off with.
The bulk of it has to come from you, as it were, is that? But you may just need a bit of encouragement.
Absolutely, yeah. If that can happen, and
of course.
But really wanting true change, it tends to have to come from the person themselves. Absolutely, yeah.
No, that's understandable. Yeah. You mentioned the BDD Foundation's got a few projects in the pipeline and going to schools and things like that. That's absolutely fantastic. And what other sort of support does the foundation offer in terms of the groups and?
Yeah, well, we've also published a book, Stories of Recovery and Hope. So that's been published. That's a great resource. It's available on Amazon.
Fantastic.
And we also have a conference coming up, which will be on the 9th of November this year.
Okay, where will that be?
That will be in London.
Fantastic.
And that's going to be amazing because there will be so many different speakers there. There'll be workshops. And when we've done it previously, it's always been a really incredible experience, for people, because we can come together and help to.
Are you finding more people turning up each time? Each year?
They've always been really, really popular.
Oh,
and
fantastic.
I would urge anyone to come to the conference because there will be a lot of stuff available and it will give them a guidance in terms of how they can go forward.
So, Minnie, thanks for talking about the BDD Foundation, and it seems to be they've got quite a lot of resources available, as well as just the workshops and the group meetings and everything.
That's right.
Can you just tell us a little bit about some of the other things that are available for people who feel they're suffering, or indeed carers or parents or friends?
Yeah, I would say if they live anywhere near London, to come to the support groups because they are open for parents and friends and supporters as well. And I think on the whole, most of the parents, friends that have come along, they then begin to learn about the illness. Yeah, because it can seem a very abstract concept otherwise, but they start to kind of like get it and understand it. And if they can't come to the groups, there's books available on it.
Yes.
They could maybe do a little bit of reading to help them to understand it.
You mentioned relatives go to the support groups as well, or friends and family just go with the person who feels they have the condition. Do you find they had taken a little bit back thinking, oh, this explains so much in terms of what I've been seeing, or is it almost like a epiphany moment for them, thinking now I finally know what's going on, or same, I wish I'd done something sooner, or things like? Do you get mixed reactions like that, or?
Yeah, I would say on the whole the reactions are like that, and I think it helps people to have a lot more patience and compassion for people that have BDD. Yeah. Because it's a case of, I didn't understand how big the suffering actually is, maybe, because the person that they're supporting may not necessarily tell them how great the suffering is.
Yes. So, and you mentioned before, it's often a condition confused, misconception, or it's a vanity thing, when obviously it's definitely not. It's a far bigger thing bigger deal than that. And on that note, actually, in terms of receiving compliments when you're at the sort of height of this condition, how do you take compliments if when you're at that age where it was at its worst?
Yeah, that is a tricky one, because compliments can bring your thoughts back to your own appearance. And with BDD, anything that brings you back to your own appearance, on the whole, is not great, basically.
I see.
So it's a tricky one. It's, I mean, I'll talk about my own experience. If I got compliments, it would make me feel a bit more relaxed and better. Mm-hmm. But then it would also make me feel like I have to maintain a certain way of being as well.
Oh, I see. So if you had someone say, "Oh, you look lovely today," or "Oh, your hair looks nice today," you then have a standard.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yes, that can happen.
Right.
So the thing with compliments, it can be a bit of a vicious circle, really, and it's not necessarily a way out of BDD, but it can act like a bit of a sort of safety behaviour in that it helps you to feel temporarily better. However, it adds to the rumination about your appearance. So
just exacerbates it later on.
So it's a tricky subject.
You've very clearly said, surgery is not the answer. Cosmetic surgery is not the answer for things like BDD. Do you find have people come to support groups who've undergone procedures and found they're not happy, and do they sort of chase more and more and more and spend more and more money on things and not have any fulfillment?
Yeah, that's pretty much been the case, really. We've had people that have talked about wanting to have cosmetic surgery, and then eventually they've had it, and then they've come back to the group to say that they've had the cosmetic surgery and they're devastated because it doesn't look like they wanted it to look. Sometimes they think it looks even worse.
Oh, right. So it's not even just not being happy with the overall. It's like I was better off beforehand, even.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I would say pretty much all the time. Well, cosmetic surgery is not the answer. In fact, it's a pretty dangerous way to go if you have BDD.
Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you for giving up your time to talk about this. And it's amazing hearing your story, and actually just how much it's obviously affected most of your life, actually, up until a point where now you're well and able to enjoy life. And it's lovely to see that even in most extreme cases there is hope and there is treatment options out there, and it's a case of not giving up and realizing that there is support for people with BDD, especially with the fantastic work that the BDD Foundation is doing as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was Minnie Iris, a remarkable lady who has gone through a huge amount with BDD and has shown that there is hope out there for anyone who is suffering or knows that someone who is suffering. Just to say, the BDD Foundation is a fantastic resource. They have a wonderful website. They are a charitable organisation. They rely purely on donations and private funding, and it's run by a host of volunteers. And you can check their bios online. If you are affected by any of the topics discussed or feel that you need to discuss BDD, please seek help from your GP if you are in the UK, and also the BDD Foundation as well. If you are having any suicidal thoughts, please seek urgent help either from your general practitioner or your local emergency department. And I will be providing links to the Samaritan and the SANE websites. They can be found in the episode description. Thank you very much for joining today, and as always, please look after yourselves, and I look forward to joining you again next time. I'm Dr. Bolivios. Goodbye.